Well, let's talk for a minute about the man he beat in the finals. Gerwyn Price topped the table during the league phase of the Premier League, but fell short in the final and is now winless in 5 career televised finals against Michael van Gerwen. How tough do you think this defeat will be for Price to take?
Yeah, I mean, looking at his reaction on stage, and you kind of expect it from a player that's just lost a major final, but you could tell straight away there was no hiding how disappointed Gerwyn Price was to lose that final. And for me, I was thinking about Gerwyn Price after this final, and it gave me a lot of similar signs, similar vibes to the World Match Play last year. And again, it was an MVG Price final to decide the champion, with MVG coming out on top. And that week in Blackpool, we'd seen Gerwyn Price throw that 9-darter going into the final. He was already guaranteed to go back to world number 1. He was into a match play final for the first time. And yeah, it had all the hallmarks of being a perfect week for him, going on to win the title. But as I say, loses out in that final to MVG. And again, heading into the Premier League final, he was fancied to win the title. He'd had an impressive campaign in the lead up, topping the table after 16 weeks. But also earlier that night, I touched on it, beating Johnny Clayton in the semi-finals 10-2 with 107 average. And it's one of the highest averages we've seen in a game on a finals night in the Premier League. But in the end, it was the same outcome. Michael van Gerwen was the winner in the final. And you look at the stats on paper, 99.5 average, over 40% on the doubles. It's a good performance. It's not to be sniffed at, but losing 11-5, it's just a fairly one-sided final. And I was looking back at it, and I mentioned some of those big finishes that MVG pulled out, the 170 to break in 12 darts, that put him 4-2 up. Price was sat on 46. In that instance, you've just got to hold your hands up and say, fair play. That's an incredible finish to pull out in that moment and in that final. And again, another 12 darter to break, the 128. Price had just missed a ball for a 167. So 2 back-to-back 12 darters against you on your own throw is world class. And I was looking 10 legs into it, 7-3 up. Michael van Gerwen was. Price was averaging 115 on his own throw, but against the throw. And I think this is where the problem was for him in the final. He wasn't really giving anything back. He was averaging under 88 at the halfway point after 10 legs of the final. And he hadn't even carved out one dart at a double against the throw. And okay, after the interval, Van Gerwen missed a few chances and Price was able to get one of those breaks back, but wasn't able to build on it. And the final stats in the end, Price on throw was averaging 111, against throw 88. And in these games, in these major finals, against someone playing as well as Michael van Gerwen did with that 105 average, unfortunately for him, it's just not going to cut it. And I think when he looks back at it, that's where he's going to look and say, I wasn't putting in enough big scores against the Van Gerwen throw. I wasn't putting him under enough pressure. And okay, I think there's way more positives for Gerwyn Price to take from this year's Premier League than there is negatives. Before this year, it's been said many times he'd never made the playoffs, and it's a tournament that he wasn't particularly fond of, but he's ticked that off the list. He's got to the playoffs, he's finished top of the table, and you look back through the history books, there's been more players win the playoffs than there has been top the table, which shows you how difficult that is to do. But at the end of the day, the main goal is to win the playoffs, and Price, unfortunately for him, he's fallen short this time round. And now for him, it's going to be about bouncing back, winning something as soon as possible. He's going to get a few chances over these next few weeks, and the sooner he can do that, the sooner he can put the memory of that final disappointment behind him.
Yeah, you said almost exactly what I was going to say. And I'll start with the semifinal. I mean, he was, I want to say brilliant, but he was just Gerwyn Price. We're used to seeing him go out and average close to 110, if not over 110, because that's just what he's been doing all year. A 107 average. Okay, it's a little longer to do it over 12 legs as opposed to a best out of 11 to do it at best out of 19. But that's just what Gerwyn Price has been doing in season 2023. And it showed that on the night he was ready to bring his best stuff, but he just couldn't do it in the final. And you mentioned, especially against the throw. I'm just going to go through the 8 legs against throw, and this is what he was left on after 12 darts. Sometimes he came back. Just listen to what he was left on after 12 darts. That's 4 visits. He was left on 158 in the first leg, 224 in the third, 146, 122, 197. The first 2 sessions, his best was a 122, which is still a triple and a single for the bullseye. That's the best he was able to leave himself after 12 darts in those 5 legs. First leg back from the second break, he left himself on 65. Oh, sorry, there was only one break, but from the after the break, when he came back in the 11th leg, he left himself on 65 after 12. That was his best. And he actually didn't close it out the next turn. He ended up taking 5 darts before he earned his only break in 17. And then in 98 and 186 in the 15th leg. He was only left on a 2-darter after 12 darts in 2 of the 8 legs against MVG's throw. That is just terrible at this standard. You would expect to be left under 100 in at least half the legs, if not more. And you need to be trying to be left under 100, especially when you are behind or chasing like he was all day since MVG won the bull. So to not give himself even a real chance on the MVG throw in 6 of the 8 legs, that did him in. And it wasn't like he was invincible on his throw either. A 99 average, it sounds pretty good, but when you're not contesting half the legs and you're giving your opponent a chance in the half you are contesting, it's never going to be enough. And for Gerwyn Price, it was really a disappointing performance because of that. He has been the best player this year. I still think he is the best player in the world right now, but it's not by that much, and he cannot afford a match where he lets the second best player in the world run riot over him. How does he take this defeat? Well, as you said, there's going to be a couple TV events coming up that aren't worth nearly as much, but will put himself in that position to get some of that confidence back ahead of the World Match Play. And the World Match Play is still one of those events he hasn't won. He's been to the finals of every ranking televised event so far. He's been to the finals of almost every televised event. But the World Match Play is one of the ones he hasn't won yet, and it's certainly the biggest one that he hasn't won yet. Winning the World Cup or winning the U.S. Darts Masters ahead of that will get him at least hopefully some reward for what he has thrown so far this year. And if he can do that, maybe he can go back into the World Match Play and be like, I didn't have my night, but I know that in any given match, I am the favorite. I am the best player. And as long as I go in with that mentality, and I go in like I've started all these Premier League nights and averaged 110 first match, there's only one match each night. He needs to take the positives out of this. The semifinal was a huge positive, and it's one that can keep him pushing in the right direction. But if he dwells on the final, if he dwells on the fact that he did not look like even a top 10 player in that final, then I don't know, because he's having a purple patch, a very long purple patch, but it can turn sour very quickly if you don't push on from it.